Hi everyone, my name is Routledge. I'm speaking to you on Earth Day, April 22nd, 2020, the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, from my yard in Durango, Colorado. And I want to share with you the status of my candidacy for United States Congress. And my website is rootforcitizencongressman.org. Share a little bit of the results of that, and then talk about Earth Day, and in particular Earth Day 50 years ago. So we recently finished all our state assembly and convention voting. Went on from about 10 days ago through just recently. And there were 3 candidates for the Colorado's 3rd District. I was one of them. James Iacino was one, and Diane Mitch Bush was the other. I want to go back to 2018 because I ran briefly in 2018. I filed just a couple of months before the assembly, so I didn't have much time, but it was sort of a get my feet wet and learn the system and trial and so forth. But I got my 10 minutes on stage at the assembly, district assembly, the same as Diane Mitch Bush, and it was Carl Hanlon then. The results of that were that I got a precious 7 votes, a little over 2% of the 340 votes there. Diane and Carl Hanlon split the rest of the votes relatively evenly, 50-something versus 40-something. So that was that. And so I rolled over my candidacy with the FEC for the 2020 election cycle, and I've been running in that cycle. And if you've followed me at all, you know that I put out 3 videos on that. So I won't go much into what my candidacy was about or anything. But so we just finished here. Now the results are about the same for me. I got a precious 11 votes this time out of 358, and that was a little over 3%. Again, Diane and James Iacino, they split the votes about evenly. James got 177 votes, Diane got 170. Now, there's a difference in financing here, and just to go over what the FEC website, and you can go on the website to get these results. James had just spent about $368,000 to this point in his campaign. Diane had spent $325,000, and I had spent about $6,900, $6,900. James is left with cash on hand of $361,000, Diane with $478,000, and me, Root, with $531 in the bank. Now, each of Diane and James brought in about somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000. I brought in a little over $7,000, but of which $4,200 was from loans from candidate to the committee, basically on my credit card, which stands at about $5,800 now, and about almost $3,000 in small contributions. So quite a difference there. And you might wonder why somebody who's 73 years old would be so crazy as to do this to himself twice in a row even. And to get at that, we really have to go to Earth Day. Earth Day in 50 years ago. And think about where you were 50 years ago, April 22nd, 1970, for the very first Earth Day. Well, James, he's only 37 now, so he wasn't yet born for 13 years. Diane was just going into college at about 20 years old, and I was 23 years old in the United States Air Force. And I dug out my Navigator time log and to see where I might have been. In fact, I had just gotten home from a lengthy 9-day trip out in the Pacific, which took me from McChord Air Force Base, is where I was stationed. It's Tacoma, Washington, So it took me from McChord to Wake Island and then up to Yokota Air Base in Japan, which is just outside Tokyo. And from there we did some shuttles to Osan, Korea, and Misawa Air Base actually it's a Navy base in Japan. And then to Kadena Air Base on Okinawa, and down to a base we call CCK in Taiwan, back and forth to Yokota, and then on down to the Philippines, and then into Da Nang, and some runs in Vietnam, and then back to the Philippines, and then our route on back to Yokota, and then back to McChord Air Force Base with a stop in Travis. Very long trip, about 55 hours of flying time in the air. And at that time, the deaths in Vietnam, in fact at the end of 1970, the total deaths in Vietnam was about 55,000. And that was 94% of all the deaths that would occur in Vietnam. We're talking about American deaths. Of course, hundreds of thousands of other lives were lost there as well. The total on record for Vietnam total deaths is 58,220, official number. So that was a good 8 years into the war, seven or 8 years into the war, and to get to that point. Now the coronavirus right now is about 45. Right today, April 26th, is about 45,000, which is today is Wednesday, and it will reach that number of 55,000 by Sunday, just projecting out on the same rate of deaths that we're getting now. By Monday or Tuesday, it will surpass the total number of deaths of all military personnel in Vietnam that died in Vietnam in just a few days here. So just as a benchmark comparison of how many people are dying from this virus. Think about it. We think back on the Vietnam War and all these deaths, 58,000, over 58,000 deaths, and all those names on the wall and everything, and it's a huge number. And my goodness, here we are, about a month into where it's really been ramping up on this coronavirus and COVID-19 deaths to reach the same number. So it's accelerating very fast, and it's a huge, huge number of deaths. So 1970 was a big year for me. So here we are, Earth Day. I was a navigator in the Air Force, and got my private pilot's license actually around this time, actually in April of 1970. I met my future wife, Darlene, in August of 1970. She had just turned 20, and we got married in December. And now I was flying in and out of Vietnam my whole career, my whole 4 years in the Air Force pretty much, except for navigator school. So I was in and out of combat zones and the combat theater many, many times, but I still had to do an assignment over there, PC, a permanent change of station, and so we got married December 18th of 1970, and it wasn't 2.5 months later, and I was deployed to Vietnam for a full year to Tan Son Nhut Air Base in a different flying assignment and so forth. And you can look on my website and see some of those photos about what I was doing around those times. Got back from there. It's 1972, but so by the time I get back, and I was supposed to do wings plus 4 years, which would have been a total of about 5 years. But I put in for an early out. The war was winding down, and I got out at the end of June in 1972. And At that point, me and my wife, Darlene, we went back to school, and I wanted to study ecology, and she wanted to get into some kind of natural resource business, agriculture, and that sort of thing. So we spent most of the 70s in school, really a fun time to be in school, but studying very hard in ecology and environmental science, and really wanting to do something to help our environment. And that 50 years ago really is the nugget that I bring forward through my life, and as to why I would be crazy enough to jump in and run for Congress with no money and no real significant support or anything, because my heart was in it and I wanted to do something to save the planet. Time goes on, and life goes on, of course, and all of that, and there's lots of that in my bio on my website. But to bring it forward now to about 2007, which was when I really jumped in as a climate activist in the local Durango area here, very visible publicly with op-eds and various activities going on. And taking on one of the Exxon's senior executives, the chief. He was actually the top scientist for Exxon. He was in charge of strategic R&D planning, a PhD physicist, and a complete climate denier, and still putting out that propaganda from Exxon about it's all a hoax and so forth. So I took him on directly. I debated him, I wrote op-eds against him and letters to the editor and on through time, and he didn't let up. In any event, that brings me right up to 2016, and I ran to be a national delegate for Bernie Sanders and was elected and went to Philadelphia for that. And then Bernie said, well, do something, stay in, run for something. And so I just ran, I figured out how to run for Congress by myself. I don't have a committee. I'm the committee. I didn't have a manager, campaign manager, finance manager, none of that, treasurers and everything. I figured out how to file with the FEC, did all the video tutorials and so forth, and learned as I went. And I ran first in 2018 and then in 2020. Now, I wrote a book, a 164-page book that is on my available. Hi, sweetie pie. This is the neighborhood kitty that just walked in. I don't know if you saw him in the camera. I have 3 cats and 1 visitor kitty that comes over regularly. Anyway, I ran and I wrote this book, finished it. That's why I didn't file till late in 2018. But if you go on, and you will find links to my run and actually a video of me marching with an Afghan veteran, Captain Allison Scobie, who was a RN, battlefield surgical nurse in Afghanistan. And we were carrying a poster that had the summary of my vision there, and that was July 4th of 2017. So so in 20 I got that finished, and so that's what I was running on in 2020, and I was giving it another shot, my best shot. I have no money. Like I said, I'm a senior, a fixed income senior. I'm highly educated, but my consulting business, which had been going since 1991, really got hammered in the 2008 downturn, and it never really came back as a decent living after that. So it's been just keeping my head above water kind of times, but I still ran and I still threw my name in the hat. I'm very pleased with the results. I was always going to be, I wasn't kidding myself. I was always the future former candidate for U.S. Congress. Which I guess I am now, although I'm keeping my registration active with the FEC. My website's going to be active. I got everything out there. I managed to get my chance to speak at several events, several forums where Diane, Mitch Bush, and James Icino and myself were up front, and we got to, it's sort of a parallel debate kind of thing, but not really responding to each other directly, other than the questions that were asked to us. So I managed to get my ideas out there. I've got established my social media, my website, and I'm going to keep all of it active. I will be producing some videos, so I'm just getting used to this, about specific issues. And I'm going to take them on one by one. And in order to do that, I've really got to figure out the new software. And if anybody, I'm going to ship this out in a MailChimp blast. I'll mention something about that in a second. But if anybody knows of some good software where I can sit at my desk and record a video, as well as bring up a PowerPoint presentation and go back and forth to it and that sort of thing, and talk to you folks about specific issues. So I will explore Medicare for All, a very lengthy bill. I will explore the Green New Deal. I will explore the concept of deficits and debts and what that means and what it doesn't mean, and it's a huge myth about it. So I will share some information and insights about from economist Stephanie Kelton, who has a book coming out here in June. I already got my order in for it, and it's titled The Deficit Myth. She talks about modern monetary theory and so forth. And I also want to do a talk about climate stability. And I focused early in my campaign on the science more, but if we're going to talk about climate stability, well, climate instability, because it's destabilizing rapidly, we have to understand what climate stability means and what that looks like and what's happening to us now. So that's my plan. I have about 1,500 names in my MailChimp list server, and there's been, a lot of people. You start with a list, and people subscribe, and people unsubscribe, and so forth. So if you don't want to receive these from me anymore, please just unsubscribe, and because I'm not out to bug people or fill their inbox of the stuff that they don't want to look at and so forth. But if you do want to follow me, I will be sending these kinds of things out through my MailChimp listserv, and also the same with the videos. Hey, if you're not really interested and you started and it doesn't look that interesting, then just bail. It's not about feelings here. I want to share some stuff that I know very deeply, I'm very expert on, and I know what is needed for our future. I'm a systems person, systems engineer. I have a PhD in industrial engineering, and I've studied ecosystems and climate systems and in-depth kind of stuff. So I know that. I think about systems and how they interact, and the characteristics of systems, about time lags and interactions, and nonlinearity and feedback loops and things like that. So I want to share stuff with you. Now, whether, I didn't get many votes, so, that's not the point, but I'm still am very proud of what I completed and got up there, and it will be up there, and I'm going to add to it. And I will stay with rootforcitizencongressman.org. I'm going to leave my campaign actually on file with the FEC through the November election. We'll see what happens then. And what to do after that point, but no major changes. But I'm not in the running to be the nominee. It'll be either Diane or James, who will then take on Scott Tipton, who, by the way, was only 13 years old on the first day, first Earth Day, and so there you have it. I have thoroughly enjoyed this effort. It's been an incredible experience. I got around to all 29 of our counties, which is all of western Colorado, from Wyoming to New Mexico. For you folks that don't know Colorado here, we call it the West Slope, all the way over to Pueblo and some of the southern counties. And and I got around to them twice, through December, January, and February, through some blizzards and, going over the pass, I mean, ahead of the snowplow. I mean, it's like, you can't be intimidated by mountains and snow if you're going to run for Congress in the 3rd District here of Colorado, all of Western Colorado. So lots of wonderful people. Thank you so much. Many of you helped me so much, and you've provided places for me to stay, and you've encouraged me, and you've brought more people to meet and so forth. So I have lots of friends now throughout this area, even though my campaign for the 2020 election is completed. So wish everybody well. I hope everybody is keeping safe, all tucked in. I've got my 3 kitties, and we're pretty much tucked in unless I have to make a run to the grocery store or something. And our little natural food grocery store, Durango Natural Foods, is a block and a half up my alley here. So keeping safe, and we'll get through this, and then we'll figure out. This is a portal, really. This, I mean, it's so unusual. We were really in difficult trouble with the climate crisis, and that time lags are different for that system than a pandemic. But here comes this pandemic, and it has sliced us in half. It's sliced our economy in half. So there's a sort of the pre-pandemic and a post-pandemic world. And the post-pandemic world is not going to be anything like the pre-pandemic world. We're not going back to failed systems that brought us to this point. Our country has been, our systems have been poorly cared for, poorly designed, and we're seeing that now, everything collapsing as we move forward on this pandemic. So we are learning all kinds of stuff, but we need to rethink what kind of society we want, and how we are going to design our society and for the future, and so that we can be more resilient and have a robust economy that will be strong, but that won't be clobbered completely by a shock like this, because we're going to have lots of shocks as time goes on. We're going to have experience shock events, more pandemics, I'm sure. They've been predicting that, the scientists, for years, and here we are. We have it now, and we were very ill prepared and very poorly managed from the start on. We should have been way ahead of the curve. So we're learning that. But same with climate. I mean, we're going to have shock events from climate. We're going to have extended events, drought events, and flood events, and that sort of thing. And it's only going to get worse and worse because we're not turning the corner. We have not turned the corner on climate. So I intend to be very outspoken. And it's all about education too. And my run, even, and I put that in my writing, that hey, the bottom line, this is really about education, and I'm out to educate people about what the strategic threats of the future are and how we might address them. And as you know, if you've followed my stuff from earlier, that my approach, my analytical approach to this has been to structure the threats that we are facing in terms of issues that are in the way of a viable future. By viable, we mean something that we can survive and go on, and that will carry itself forward, instead of a downward trend into a hothouse Earth, iceless planet. And we're about at that point of turning, if we don't turn the corner now and go in a different direction. So those areas ended up being healthy democracy, and you can see how badly our democracy is failing under this stress. Again, this shock event is surfacing all kinds of inadequate functionality of our systems, in particular our democracy. Well, I went in to play the video and found out that my battery had run out just toward the tail end of it. So, and of course I took everything apart, so I'm not in the same position exactly. The sun's different, everything. Anyway, to finish this up, I was talking about these 4 strategic areas, and the democracy. Boy, anybody who's paying attention knows how in dire straits our democracy is, even our ability to vote under these kinds of circumstances. But beyond that, Republicans ever trying to really sabotage the voting system and steal elections. It's absolutely morally disgusting what they are doing. In any event, and I mentioned a little bit about each of these before, but just to wrap it up, healthy population, and the big thing there, and of course there's all kinds of things that affect the health of our population, including our society and all of that, but Medicare for all. Imagine if we had Medicare for all in place before this pandemic came along. First of all, everybody would be covered. You wouldn't have a health care system that was an employee benefit. It would be a moral human right that you would have health care. And and 3.5 million people back, that was a week ago or so when I was making the earlier video, had lost their jobs and therefore their health care. And of course that's way higher now. So people are losing their jobs, they're losing their health care. It's an absolute ridiculous statement. All these candidates that were running for president in 2020 and talking about how you'd have this choice and that choice, thinking that what's stable is employee health care. And it's not. As we see, the business goes out of business, you've lost your job, you've lost your health care. You get laid off, you've lost your health care. You want to change jobs, you've lost your health care. You have nothing that is sustainable through that. So we need to fix that. And the solution to that is Medicare for all. And none of this bureaucratization that Pelosi and Schumer and some of these establishment Democrats all want to do all the time, means testing and all this. It needs to be like a bus or a library. If you're a billionaire, you can go on the bus, you can drop 75 cents in it and say, we're not going to charge you more for that. Same with the library. We need to think about our healthcare system that way, so that by default everybody is covered, and we have a national healthcare budget, and we plan our coverage for that. And because then it's not focused on individual entities as profit centers like it is now, people can't get rural health care because clinics can't make money going out there and serving a few people. We would then refocus the goal on providing health care for everybody instead of trying to make money out of it. So it's a filthy system the way it is, this profit-driven system. Capitalists are just sucking the life out of things. They always want to raise the price and lower the cost, which means they want to deliver less. So we got to get rid of that. And healthy economy with health economy with public financing, with a public bank, and a new way of doing that. Instead of acting like, well, we've got to go to the Wall Street people and float bonds to those guys, and they have all the money, and so we have to go there and get it. We don't have to do that, and I will be teaching more about that later on. And just think about it. If we have Medicare for all and we drop the student debt, we cancel the student debt, that lifts everybody up. Tens of thousands of people that are paying maybe $500, $600, $800 a month in those kind of payments. That's a huge monthly boost to the economy. With Medicare for all, there won't be any out-of-pocket expenses, and your actual take-home pay, your net take-home will increase under Medicare for all. Those two things would go a long way. Green New Deal is all about a very systemic response to the environment, so healthy environment is the other fourth strategic focus. And there's so much as part of that, and I'm going to go into detail on that too. Part of it in terms of a just transition to a different future is where we take care of people who are losing their jobs because of this transition. They're in the fossil fuel business right now. It's not their fault. That's where they've been making a living for their family and so forth. So we have to keep them whole through a transition to a different future, and that's all in there. Okay, and a job for anybody who wants it. That's another part. This is a new deal. This is an FDR new deal. This is not just green. It's not like just get the carbon dioxide emissions cut down and so forth, and it does all that, but it is actually a new deal. The Conservation Corps that FDR started, all of those we will create. There's so much to do to fix our country, and we need to do this. So we will create those jobs, assuming that we can get the right administration in there. Bernie Sanders really is the window to the future, and I'm very disappointed that he has dropped out, but we'll see how that works out by the time this summer. And who knows, everything is so different now. But in any event, those policies that Bernie was putting forth are the right policies, and so that we will create jobs. There will be government jobs, and I am going to blow away all this myth that the Republicans put forth all the time, especially this most disgusting presumption that if we give people too much, human beings, they're inherently lazy and they don't want to work, and if we give them too much, we need to keep them on the edge so that they can hardly make it, so they'll work harder, like we're some big daddy teacher. This is the Republican image of themselves. They're going to have tough love for all those losers out there, the lower half of our population that are just spring-loaded not to want to work. It's just bullshit. It's completely empty, and it's really an immoral statement. It's really a filthy, disgusting projection on everybody that you don't want to work. People want to work. They want to have a dignified life. They want to contribute to society. So it's total bullshit, and we need to take care of people. We need to get money out to people right now. If we had a Congress that was doing the right thing, we would have kept and we still got to do this, but from the start, to keep this flow of money through our population, through our economy, by giving people money who have lost their jobs, and not through the bureaucracy of a means test Nancy Pelosi. This is just bureaucracy that Democrats seem to want to put in there all the time. It's like, get money out to people, keep the flow going. That's what it's all about. And if we'd have done that, then people would be whole. They would have the money to spend. They still need groceries. They still pay rent. They still do all that. It would keep society going, so that when we come out on the other side, we would have some semblance of a healthy economy. And we're not really doing that, so I don't know how that's going to turn out. But that's what we need to do. And the Green New Deal is all about that. Very comprehensive. It includes, and it depends on Medicare for All and these other things being in place. Okay. So that's it, folks. Just adding a little trailer to when my battery ran out from the earlier here. Not really paying attention. Probably a little over a half hour total, probably. But the earlier videos had to be 2 minutes, or they had to be 5 minutes, or whatever. And I'm just chatting with you and hanging out and sharing my thoughts. So again, best to everybody. I wish everybody just blessings out there, and you folks that are struggling and dealing and have caught the disease, and so many more will, and so many lives lost, and my heart goes out to the families and people who did that, who've lost lives, and family members with this COVID-19 disease, and it's tragic. It really is. I have shed many tears in my privacy of my own living room. My heartbreak about what's happening to our country, what's happening to people as we try to survive this, as well as the planet in terms of climate and so forth, is just very sad. But we need to pull it together, and young folks like Greta Thunberg, are keeping their spirits up and knowing that we got to fight for this and it's for them. And she and the ones that are all conscious saying, look, we just got to know what the science is and what the scientists are saying and follow that. And we need to do that with this COVID virus too. And if we have this anxious government to get everybody back out there, well, it will come back and bite us in a monstrous way, because the second wave in the 1918 swine flu pandemic, then that's what happened. Oh, geez, the World War II is ending. Well, it's like get out and celebrate. And they did that. And the second wave was huge. It was way worse than the first wave. So we got to be very careful about that. But who knows how that's going to turn out, except that a lot of lives are going to be lost. And as I said before, it'll be Monday or Tuesday that we will surpass the total number of lives lost, American lives, in Vietnam. And that is a huge mark. Okay? So I'm very passionate about it, and I love y'all, and I love this planet, and I love our country, and I love my kitties, and that's me tucked in my little home here in Durango, Colorado. Blessings to everybody. Bye-bye.